For years, the Philadelphia 76ers have attempted to figure out how to take down this Boston Celtics team, and Caleb Martin seems to be the clear-cut answer moving forward. I want to reflect on the modern-day Boston Strangler, the player that may very well be brought in to take down the biggest rival that the Sixers team has, and how he put it fully on display on Christmas. So let's dive right into the player that the Sixers believe they signed finally showing up here in Philadelphia, as Caleb Martin had a 23-point performance yesterday, made 7 of his 9 three-point attempts, 8 from 11 from the field overall, also added 3 rebounds, had 2 assists and a steal. A dude that really did decide this game for the Sixers team. Now, I do want to talk about just how ridiculous this performance was against the Celtics, why I think there is a trend here. This is not something that is out of character for Caleb Martin, and why I'm buying that this is now the version of him that just showed up. So first, let's start off with how absurd this is from a season-long standpoint. To talk about what Caleb Martin has done this year, he's averaging 9.4 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, 2.2 assists, and his shooting splits drastically different after yesterday. He's now up to 42.4% from the field, 36.8% from 3. To put in perspective exactly how much things change, to pull up this stat here we have from Barnard, by going 10 of 14 from deep over his last 2 games, Caleb Martin increased his three-point percentage by 9%, went from 27.8% on the season to 36.8% just yesterday. Now, to speak about the outlook against the Celtics as a whole, check out this stat here from John Corrales, who tweets, "Tonight was the 9th time Caleb Martin has shot 40% or better against Boston on 6 or more attempts from 3. He's done it twice versus Detroit and never more than once against anyone else. It is his 5th time shooting better than 50% versus Boston. He's never done it more than once versus anyone else." And that is why Caleb Martin is wearing a Philadelphia 76ers jersey. That you do need to have guys that are ready to play their best basketball against your biggest rival and against the team that is the biggest pathway to you achieving that championship here. Now, Joel Embiid is very aware of that himself, and he was asked about Caleb after the game, saying, quote, "He's playing against Boston. He hates them as much as I do." And I love that there is too much buddy-buddy in today's NBA. I want guys that hate each other, that hate their opponents, and that is what I feel from Caleb Martin when he is on the floor against this Boston Celtics team. Now, for full clarity here, for full clarity, I think a lot of this was the Celtics' fault. That how many of those three-pointers were straight up wide open for Caleb Martin? Have you guys not seen this story before? Was it fake three-point makes when he was doing it in a Miami Heat jersey? Because I've seen Caleb Martin tear out these Boston fans' hearts time after time after time. Yet he was just left open, wide open out there on the perimeter and made the team pay. Now, as far as the outlook for Caleb Martin, we cannot go without mentioning the shooting struggles that were there for the start of the season. As Derek Bodner pointed out in his tweet here, that he was shooting 27.8% from beyond the arc leading into the season. That is not going to cut it for a guy that, while he does more than this, is kind of looked at as a 3-and-D type archetype of player. But why was this the case? Why was he struggling so bad from 3? It does not take an advanced eye to view that there was something up with his jump shot here. Now, he's always been a guy with a little bit more of a unique form and a unique jump shot. The kick seems a little bit new to me, that I don't remember seeing that in Miami. And I will say, when I did kind of try to dive into this and do a little bit of a film breakdown here, my game plan when I went in is I was going to make like a side-by-side of his shooting form in Miami versus his shooting form with the Sixers. And I will say it looked far more similar than my brain remembered here, than I kind of remember viewing at the time. There was not these drastic differences, a little bit in the release point. And what that is the shoulder injury that he has been dealing with. So last week, we finally saw the Sixers shut down Caleb Martin for the shoulder injury here. And he did have a chance to catch up with Kai Carlin, to which he spoke about the outlook here. So to kind of speak on what specifically was spoken about from Kai Carlin of Sixers Wire, Caleb Martin says, quote, "It was definitely painful, getting up towards a certain range of motion and kind of like an abrupt stoppage," Martin said, "just because you know what you're going to feel once you get to a certain range. And it's almost like your body kind of does like a defense mechanism where it stops. You know what I mean? It's almost like, we don't want to feel that." And that's what he was dealing with. And that is very impactful when attempting to shoot a basketball here, that it is quite clear with our eyes that when Caleb Martin was missing, it was short, it was line drives, it looked ugly. Now, granted, some of that is just his natural form and the way that he plays, but 7 of 9 speaks from itself the way that he shot yesterday, and I'm glad that he is pain-free. Now, to have kind of the play through injuries conversation here, on one side of things, I admire it greatly from Caleb Martin. We've seen crystal clear looking at this Sixers team that has not exactly been the theme of playing through injuries, that we've seen plenty of guys miss time, and I do give him a ton of credit for scrapping through it, fighting through it, and wanting to be on the floor for this team. For what it's worth, that was his exact reputation down in Miami, and there are plenty of Heat reporters that will break down that they think his numbers would have been better last last year if he had just taken off games that he probably shouldn't have played. But because of the absence of guys like Jimmy Butler and the inconsistent availability of a lot of members of that team, Caleb Martin continued to gut through it. Now, again, I do have a ton of respect for that, but at the same time, in this specific situation with this Sixers team, if you're not right, man, I would rather you get yourself right, and finally Caleb Martin took those steps here. Now, to speak about the outlook for how he fits into the Sixers team, yesterday also marked the first time that we saw our perceived starting lineup entering the season. Now, we knew there were a couple different directions the Sixers could go with things, but if you asked me leading into game one, what would be the full-out starting lineup for this Sixers team, it would have been what we saw yesterday. That, of course, being the big three with Joel Embiid, with Paul George, and with Tyrese Maxey. And those other two spots, my belief would be Kelly Oubre and Caleb Martin. That is what we saw against the Boston Celtics. Now, granted, I certainly believe there is a case to be made that there are matchups that Gershon Yabusele will be beneficial. KJ Martin was performing quite well in that role when given that opportunity, although he now finds himself on the all too familiar place of the injury list there. So there's still a lot of season to work through this year, but I was very excited to see that. And I do want to make it clear to everyone that Caleb Martin is going to be a huge part of the Sixers team, not just this season, but moving forward. And to dive into his exact contract here, I would argue this is one of the best bargain deals in the entire NBA. And what that is, it was a 4-year contract worth $35 million, making $8.1 million this year, $8.5 million next year, $8.9 million the following, and in the 2027 to 2028 season, he has a $9.3 million player option. That's about 5% of the salary cap, 5.8% to be exact for this specific season, and he's going to provide far more value than that to this Sixers team. Once again, now that he is hitting his stride again, this is a guy who does the little things, that you don't bring in Caleb Martin to lead you to victories over the Charlotte Hornets on a random Tuesday in December. You bring in Caleb Martin to contend for a championship. He is a big game player that shows up when the lights are brightest. This is not a situation of he's going to carry you to regular season wins. That's not his game. What he is going to do is steal the extra possessions that decide playoff games. He's kind of cut a little bit from that Josh Hart-like mold, who we obviously saw murder this Sixers team last year by doing all the little things that they did not have a guy to do them. That is who Caleb Martin is, and that is what I expect from him moving forward. And by the way, those scoring punches, those random nights where we do get 23 points out of him, they will still happen. And I'm very excited that we now have an opportunity, or have seen this on full display against the Boston Celtics here. So that is my takeaway for Caleb Martin, is that I do believe this is a guy that's going to be a foundational piece of the playoff run. I know it has not been pretty thus far, but I do believe this guy is just finding himself. And I can guarantee right now that when you zoom out and look ahead to the final part of the Sixers season, that Caleb Martin's going to be talked about as a lot of people's favorite players. He's everything that a Philadelphia fan should want. That he is tough, he's gritty, he's hard-nosed, he competes his heart out, he's willing to play through it and put his body on the line, and the dude is a damn good basketball player on top of all that. So shout out to Caleb Martin for making his presence known and really deciding that Sixers game. There's a ton of other stories as well I do want to highlight before we sign off. A quick shout out to Tyrese Maxey, who seems to be continuing to be thrown into more of the forefront of this franchise. He's now up to 25.7 points per game on the season. Those shooting splits beginning to climb, that he's up to 33.7% from three after being held below 30 for most of the start of the season, 42.1% from the field, that number on the rise as well. That he is a guy who seems to be carrying the weight of the organization a little bit more than I expect to be the case at this point, but that only strengthens how many options that this team has, and very excited about what this team is shaping up to. So we have a pretty defining stretch for this Sixers team. That is the exact type of win over the Celtics on Christmas that can catapult a change within an organization. And now you got a little bit of an easier path. That looking ahead to this West Coast trip, they've got 3 games I would classify as they absolutely should win, and 2 that they probably should win. And for that exact lineup, the absolutely should win is over the Jazz, over the Trailblazers, and over the Brooklyn Nets. The probably should win, the Golden State Warriors and the Sacramento Kings, although that is a back-to-back, so it gets a little complicated there. So we'll see how things shake out, but overall, a lot to be excited about this Sixers team for really the first time all season, that the tides are finally turning on what has been a season of hell to this point. So shout out to Caleb Martin for helping to spark that change. Shout out to the Sixers team to be getting to look like what we always believed they could be, or what they were designed to grow into. And still a lot more basketball to be played until we do get to that final playoff push. So appreciate each and every one of you guys tuning into this video here. And I do want to hear, what is your excitement level for Caleb Martin? And what is the ideal role that you guys believe? Should he be in that 5th starter role? Is there a world where the best usage of him is coming off the bench, making an impact? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, appreciate each and every one of you guys. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button if you have not already. Drop a like on this video. And I'll be back talking to you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.